Welcome to today's episode of Unmasking Injustice, where we take important conversations out of the classroom and bring them into real life. I'm your host, Lynette Worthy, and in this episode, we're discussing a movement that reshaped our conversations about power, safety, and accountability: the Me Too movement. Trigger warning: before we begin, I want to pause and acknowledge that this topic is sensitive. If you're listening and have personal experience with sexual harassment or assault, I want to acknowledge you at this moment personally and hope you feel empowered by this talk. When Me Too exploded across social media in 2017, it wasn't just a trend. It was a release, an exposure of the lack of accountability in our society, particularly by men of power. Men like Harry Weinstein, who was accused and eventually convicted of rape, caused the Me Too movement to become a national headline. In fact, international headlines. Millions of people across the globe, especially women, finally felt safe enough to say, "This happened to me." Suddenly, stories that had been whispered in private rooms or perhaps not even shared at all were shared publicly. So if you're a victim and you can relate to how difficult sharing your story may be, and what the movement, how powerful weren't just the stories, but the solidarity behind them. There was strength in saying "me too" and strength in echoing the same message. But as powerful as the movement was, the national conversation quickly grew more complex. Even while Harry Weinstein was convicted, his conviction was overturned, but he still faced other charges for which he was convicted and sentenced in California. It sounds kind of complicated, right? So convicted, overturned, convicted again. I feel like at this point, the justice system is trying to figure out how this all works. So on one side, right, there are millions of survivors finally feeling validated. And on the other side, there were concerns about fairness, due process, and the possibility of false accusations. And that's the other side, like the backlash of this whole thing, right? So what makes this complicated is that while people feel validated and empowered, others took advantage of the opportunity to falsely accuse someone. Some people questioned, can a movement empower victims while also ensuring that accusations are handled responsibly? It's not an easy question. This is not an easy topic. And that's exactly why we need to talk about it. We cannot acknowledge the positive effects of this movement while ignoring the damage it can cause with a false accusation. So, research on backlash, especially studies on masculinity politics, shows that some men felt or feel increasingly anxious or even victimized by such movements. They worried about being falsely accused or about ordinary interactions being misrepresented. So, for example, conversations at work, interacting with female coworkers, something that could be innocently misunderstood, misconstrued. So, while these fears don't invalidate survivors' experiences, they remind us that any major cultural shift can bring tension. So, we're dealing with two truths here at once. Survivors need a voice and justice. And number two, our justice system must treat every accusation seriously and fairly. So, holding both of these truths together is what is part of the work. So, what does the Me Too movement teach us? First, it proved that silence is powerful, but breaking silence is transformative. I think I should repeat that. Maybe someone needs to hear it today. It proved that silence is powerful, but breaking silence is transformative. Second, it reminds us that accountability requires nuance. And what I mean by that is accountability isn't just about deciding someone is right or wrong. It's not so black and white. You have to understand the context, the power dynamics, and the impact on both the survivor and the accused, or the victim and the accused. When you're dealing with human behavior, interactions, trauma, memory, things aren't always black and white. And third, it shows that cultural change can be really messy. It doesn't happen in one direction, and it surely doesn't happen overnight. It pushes and it pulls and it evolves. So for survivors, Me Too was a lifeline. I feel like many people were just looking for that moment to be seen and validated. For society, I believe it was a wake up call. And for all of us, it's a challenge. How do we build a world where people are safe, heard, yet treated with dignity without sacrificing fairness or justice? There isn't just a simple answer, but conversations like this move us forward. As students, future professionals, and peers, we are part of the culture that will either continue this progress or ignore it. Listening to survivors matters. Being thoughtful about fairness matters. Understanding power dynamics matters. And if Me Too taught us anything, it's this: we all have a role in shaping safer spaces. So whether it's in the workplace, in our relationships, or in our classrooms. I thank you for listening and engaging with this recast of my research essay. I hope it gives you a new way to think about a conversation that's still unfolding. If this episode brought up anything difficult, please know we have resources on campus that can help. You don't have to navigate this alone.